Okay, we're going to be going through segment lengths, which is going to be kind of new for some of us. So we've got three types of circles that we're going to see. You can see on the right-hand side there, we've got type 1, type 2, and type 3. And these are all going to have some different formulas that we're going to have to kind of memorize because I don't think they're on our formula sheet. You're not really going to see them any other way, but if one of these questions pops up on the semester test, which they will, we're going to need to know how to solve them. So let's start by writing down their formulas. The good thing about type 1, it is kind of like proportional. So our formula for number 1 will look, I'm just trying to see how to do this here. If I delete it, there we go. You can see that A times B is equal to C times D. So that's formula number 1 when you have two chords that are crossing inside of a circle just like that. A times B equals C times D. So take a second to look at the circle, and then we'll move on to type number 2. Type number 2. So if they are intersecting outside of the circle, these are secants. That was one of our vocab words. When you have a line that goes outside of a circle, that becomes a secant. And when they are connected or crossing, they could go past that and make an X. But when they're crossing like that, our formula is going to be A times A plus B equals C times C plus D. And the A and the C are the little segments that are outside of the circle. So that's what your formula is going to be for there. Type number 3 is if you have one part of it outside of the circle, it's a tangent. So this would extend past as a tangent. And then B is going through the circle, and so is, B is going towards the circle, but C is going through the circle. Our formula would look like this. A squared equals B times B plus C. And after that, you just have to know from the questions below and on the homework, you're just going to have to know which type you're working with, and you're going to have to learn the formulas for them. And that's basically it. So I can't really help anything more than you just have to sit down and memorize those formulas. And once you memorize those formulas, I think we're going to be fine. I think you guys are going to be able to solve pretty well. So for number 1, I can already tell that this is a type 1 situation where I'm going to have to multiply 14 times 15 and set it equal to 10 times x. So if I do that, I will delete this. And actually, you can pause now. Why don't you pause and solve it, and then I will show the answer at the end. Go ahead and pause. Okay, hopefully we got it figured out. I'm going to delete it. There we go. We've got 21 as our final answer. So make sure you have that written down correctly or change your answers. You might want to pause again to make sure everybody's got this answer written down. Okay, starting with number 2. I'm going to pause again. You can figure out which type you're using and you can try to set it up. Okay, so now that you've figured out you should be using type 1 again, so that A times B equals C times D, I will erase this. And that's your setup. So it again would be 4 times 5x minus 1 and then 6 times 6. And you should get x equals 2, or BD, in this case is what it was looking for. Hopefully you found that. BD equals 13. Let's go down to number 3. So on number 3, it looks like we're going to be using type 1 again. So that would be our setup, and our solve would come out to be 11. And I would like you to set up and solve number 4 for me now. So go ahead and do that. We'll pause the video. Okay, if you're back, this is what your setup should have looked like, and it looks like we should have got TQ equals 27. Number 5 looks a little bit different. Now we've got our intersection outside of the circle. So we will be using type number 2 on this, so it should set up something along the lines of that, where your A and C are on the outside. So I will go ahead and have you try to set that up for now, and then we'll do a shorter pause when you're done setting it up. Okay, so I'm going to erase it, and I'll show you. Actually, I'll do this. I'll show you the setup first. So my setup should look something like this. We have 9 and 8 as my outside pieces, and then it would be x plus 9, and then 8 plus 19 is 27. So that's where that 27 is coming from. And as they solve, they got x equals 15. That's a little bit easier than how they're going to be. I will pause again, and why don't you guys figure out number 6? Okay, so if you're back, what we've got here is our setup of 13 is my outside. That'll match with the x plus 13, and then 10 will be the outside, which will match with the 52, which is 42 plus 10 together. And then if we solve, we get NL to equal 40, which hopefully we plug back in, but x is 27 in that case. Continuing, we've got more of these. I'm going to have you set up number 7, and I'm going to have you solve 8 all the way. So set up on number 7 is all I'm asking for, and then the solve on number 8 is what we're going for. And then when you're done with that, we will have you unpause the video. Okay, so for my setup on number 7, it should have given you something like this. So hopefully that's what you had. If you did solve it all the way, you would get x equals 3, so you could put that on your paper if you'd like. For number 8, my final answer for number 8 is 9. YZ equals 9. So hopefully this is what you did. You can pause the video now just to make sure everybody in the room had this correct, or if they need to change some things, they can fix that. Going down to number 9, we've got our type 3 question. So if I go back a page, go back up to type 3. Type 3 is where we had part of a tangent line as well on our circle. It's that tangent squared equals this segment times this segment. So going back, my setup for number 9, hopefully you can figure this out on your own as well. But my setup for 9 would be 24 squared, which is my tangent, times 18 times the x plus 18. That was the whole segment. I think I might have stated that wrong over here. It's b plus c. I don't know if I said that or not. I might have just said c. But anyway, it is b plus c, so it's 18 plus x. When you solve that out, you should get 14. Moving on to number 10, I'll have you guys pause and try to set it up for now. Just set it up. Go ahead, pause. Okay, coming back from the pause, we have this as our setup. Hopefully that's what you had. As you begin to solve it, you have the 40x plus 56. If I distribute that 8, I also squared the 16 to get 256. If I keep moving, subtract 56 from both sides, you should get x equals 5, which makes Pn equal 24. So that would be it for number 10. Let's go to number 11. Number 11, we have the same situation. It looks a little bit easier to solve. Let's kind of see if that's true or not. I don't know if it's going to be true because right now what we have is we have x squared out front. So what we have is x squared equals 27 times 48. We can solve this. If we solve this, we get x squared equals 1296. Then if we square root both sides, we should get x equals 36. So that's just, I guess that came out to be a nice one where we had a 36. I wasn't sure if that was going to come out to be a nice radical or not. 1296 must be a perfect square, if you're wondering. The square root of 1296 is 36. Let's go to number 12. We have a similar situation over here. I'll have you guys set this up and solve it, and we can pause the video now and see how we do. All right, coming back from the pause, let's take a look at our answer. We have 3x squared equals 9 times 25, which 25 came from the 16 plus 9. And then we multiplied those out. By the way, this 3x gets squared as a unit because it's all of this stuff squared. So that would give us 9x squared. That's kind of tricky. Hopefully we're catching this right here. This is 3x squared. 9x squared. Because that square goes into this piece and this piece. As we continue to solve this, we'll divide 9 on both sides, and then we'll square root both sides. We should get a nice number again where we get x equals 5. Moving on to 13, we're going to get into some more difficult questions now, but it's back to type 1, as you can see. We're back to type 1. So as I solve this, my setup is the same as normal. But look at what happens. We have x minus 1 and x plus 6 on the same side. This is where we're going to have to think back to algebra a little bit, because we're going to have to distribute. And in other words, this is foiling, if you remember foiling, where we multiply our first term, our outside terms, our inside terms, and then our last terms. So we'll have 4 different pieces there. So let's see if I can see this in my work. They combine those right away. So you would have 4 terms, and then my middle term would add together to get me 5x. So the first term was, I can go through it here really quick. I'm only going to go through this once, though, so I'm not going to go through it on other questions. So make sure you're watching this one. My first term would be x squared. That's where this comes from. X times x is x squared. My outside terms would be x times 6, which is 6x. My inside term would be negative 1 times x, which is negative 1x. So 6x and negative 1x is where my 5x comes from. And then my last term would be negative 1 times 6, which is a negative 6. That equals 120. Continuing with this question, now we have to factor, but we can't factor until we get everything to one side. So I'm going to subtract the 120 over and get 0 by itself. We're going to see how much you guys can do with factoring while I'm not around. This is going to be a test for you to see how we can do. Once I factor this, I'm looking for 2 numbers, I guess, that multiply to give me negative 126, but add to give me 5. So let's pause the video for a second. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 126, but add to give me 5. Pause it and see if you can come up with those 2 numbers. Okay, if you're back from the pause, the 2 numbers that we could multiply to get negative 126 and add to get 5 were 14 and negative 9. Hopefully you came up with those. But my factoring should give me these 2 factors of x plus 14 and x minus 9. I'm not going to go too far into factoring right now. If we need to when I get back, we totally can. But that's it. And then what I need to do from there is I need to find my solutions. And my solutions are always the opposite of what you see inside the parentheses. So it would be a negative 14 and a positive 9. But I know that negative 14 can't be a length. That's not physically possible to have a length of a negative number. Like in the real world, that's not really a thing. So x equals 9 is my only solution to this question. And that's what you're going to find on the rest of these. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the factoring too much anymore. So that's something that hopefully we can figure out, or figure out as a group with your partners, or just remember from last year. But that would be my solution for that. And you're going to find that all of these have one solution. Let's go on to the next one here really quick. So this is looks like a type B question. Hopefully you've got the setup down. My setup should look like this. It's not enough just to copy it on the board. Hopefully you have this figured out, or if you need to look back at your type 2 problem, make sure you look back at it really quick. As I continue to solve this, then we're going to distribute that x in, and then we should get x squared plus 5x equals 24, but I got to move everything to one side before I factor. And now to factor, I'm not going to go through it too much, but I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me negative 24, but add to give me 5. As I continue to solve or find my factors, I'll have a positive 8 and a negative 3. And remember, my solutions are going to be the opposites of those. So it'd be negative 8 and positive 3. So there you go. That's it. That's what I got. A positive 3 for my final answer. Number 15. Go ahead and set up number 15 for me quick, and let's just see if you can do that factoring. See if you can do that solving. So this will be a longer pause, but make sure you pause the video. Once everybody feels comfortable, we can restart the video and resume it and see how you did. Go ahead and pause it now. All right, now that you're back, my setup should have looked something like this. Okay, so that's step 1. We are going to have to distribute that x in. We're going to have to multiply the 5.5 with the 28, and we should get this. Then again, we're going to move everything to one side so we can make sure that you have this written down before we start factoring. But I'm looking for 2 things that multiply to give me negative 154 and add to get me 15. Those two numbers just happen to be 22 and -7, which means a -22 and a 7 are my solutions, which makes 7 the only possible answer. I'll go back to that really quick in case you didn't get that finished written down. That's if you need to pause to write that down, make sure you do that. Number 16, it's your turn to try this one on your own as well. I will pause for an extended period of time on this one. Make sure everybody in the room is feeling like they're good with where they're at before you click resume. Okay, time to resume. My setup should look like this, where I am squaring this piece right there. When I square x plus 5, this is a very common mistake that people make. It is not x squared plus 25. If I square it, it should look, oh, they didn't even show it. Okay, so it should look something like x, I'm writing with a mouse right now, so give me a break here, but it'll be x plus 5 times x plus 5, which requires a FOIL. We would multiply there, and there, and there. Oops, I did that one already. And here. First terms, outside terms, inside terms, last terms. So your quadratic should look like this. And at this point, I'd like you to pause the video again and make sure you have that written down. And if you need to factor it again, feel free to factor. Okay, now that we're back from the pause, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give me this and add to give me this. So my two numbers that multiply to get 25 and add to give me 10 should be pretty easy. I'm sorry, I messed up. I take it back. I forgot we had the 324 over there. We have to subtract that 324 from both sides. So now I can factor, looking for two numbers that multiply to give me this and add to give me this. That's a little bit trickier. That one might take a second. Why don't you, I don't think you need to pause it anymore. Let's just go through what the answer is. It looks like 23 and -13 are the two factors. And then when I solve, of course, it's the opposite. So it would be the +13 as my final answer. These are pretty tough. A lot of the questions on here are kind of tricky. So you're going to see these problems on the homework. If you need to, you can pause the screen on these more difficult questions during the homework time, or you can pause it on some of these other ones. But if you'd like to leave some of these up on the board, feel free during work time. Good luck on the homework.